The night she told me she was leaving, I didn't sleep. I just stood at my workshop window and watched the snow bury her porch light. I think I finally understood, in that silent, frozen hour, what I was about to lose. It wasn't just her. It was the quiet way she had shown me how to feel again, after I'd sworn I never would. Let me start at the beginning. My name is Ethan Miller. I live in a quiet house on a quiet street in a quiet Vermont town. I make things with my hands, things I can measure and sand and fit together perfectly. People are harder. They don't stay. I learned that lesson years ago, and I built a life around that truth. A life of very quiet rooms. Then, one October morning, I saw the moving van. She arrived with the fall colors. Clara Bennett. I didn't know her name then. I just saw a woman standing alone in her grandmother's old driveway, arms wrapped tight around herself, staring at the house like it was a puzzle she couldn't solve. Our first interaction was a nod, just a nod, from across the yard. The kind of polite, empty gesture this town runs on. We existed in parallel silences for weeks. I'd hear her car door shut. She'd see me splitting firewood. We were two satellites in separate orbits until her front porch step gave way. I heard the crack from my workshop. When I looked out, she was just sitting on the top step, holding her knee, not crying, not making a sound, just sitting there in the cold. I didn't think. I just grabbed my toolbox and walked over. "That's rotted through," I said, my voice rough from disuse. She looked up, and for the first time I really saw her eyes. They were the color of a storm-heavy sky, and they held a tiredness I recognized, a deep, soul-level fatigue. "I can fix it," I muttered, already kneeling to examine the damage. I worked. She watched. I expected chatter, the nervous kind people use to fill space, but Clara just sat on the top step I'd propped up, sipping tea, her silence a companion, not a void. When I finished, she simply said, "Thank you, Ethan." Her voice was softer than I expected. She'd learned my name. I just nodded again, a flush creeping up my neck. The next morning, I found a note tucked into the seam of my workshop door. Not a text, a note, on thick, cream-colored paper. The handwriting was elegant, but the words were simple. "For the step and for not asking if I was okay, I wasn't. Thank you. Clara." I held that note for a long time. It felt heavy in my hand. Winter sealed the town in ice. A storm knocked the power out for 2 days. On the second night, my generator humming, I saw a single candle flickering in her dark kitchen window. I filled 2 thermoses with coffee I had brewing on the wood stove. I stood at my own door for 5 full minutes, arguing with myself. Then I walked through the knee-deep snow. She opened the door before I could knock. Wrapped in a giant knitted blanket, she just stepped back to let me in. No surprise, no big greeting. "I have coffee," I said, holding up the thermoses like a peace offering. A small, real smile touched her lips. "You're a lifesaver." We sat in her cold living room, bundled up, drinking coffee that steamed in the candlelight. We didn't talk about the past. We talked about the weight of the snow on the pine boughs, the book she was trying to read by candlelight, the way the cold made the old house groan. It was the easiest conversation I'd had in years, because it wasn't about anything at all, and it was about everything. That became our unspoken ritual, the quiet company. She'd leave a note about a leaky faucet. I'd fix it and find a slice of homemade banana bread waiting. I'd see her on her porch late some nights, a silhouette against the golden light, perfectly still. Sometimes her shoulders would shake. Silent tears. I never went to her then, I just recognized it. I'd stand in my own dark kitchen, and my chest would ache with a feeling I'd forcibly forgotten. The real turning point was another snowstorm, worse than the first. The wind screamed like it wanted to tear the world apart. A crash from her yard sent me out into the blinding white. A giant limb had smashed her fence. I found her on the back steps, not even in a coat, just staring at the destruction. "Clara, you'll freeze," I shouted over the wind. She turned to me and her face was shattered. Not from the fence, from something breaking inside. "It's always like this," she cried, the wind stealing her words. Everything I tried to hold together just splinters. I pulled her inside, into the dim hall. She was shivering violently. "I gave everything," she whispered, her voice raw, broken open by the storm. "In every relationship, in the city, in my job, I poured myself out until I was empty, and they just took it and left me with the silence. How do you come back from that? Tell me, Ethan, how?" The air left my lungs. I saw myself in her words, my own silent, empty house, my own guarded heart, the careful distance I kept from the world. And for the first time in 6 years, I spoke the truth I carried. "You don't come back from it," I said, my voice low and rough. "You just build a new house on the broken ground, and you live in it, alone, because at least the silence you choose doesn't lie to you." I looked directly at her, my own walls crumbling. Someone I trusted. She didn't just leave. She made me believe I was unlovable before she went, and I believed her. So I stopped trying. We stood there in the hallway, two shipwrecked souls washed up on the same lonely shore. The wind rattled the windows, and then, slowly, her hand found mine. Her fingers were ice cold. I curled mine around them, warmth passing between our broken pieces. No grand declaration, just a silent understanding, profound and deep, in the heart of the howling dark. That winter, love didn't roar into our lives. It seeped in. It was in the extra mug she set out for me in the mornings. It was in the way I'd sand the edges of a shelf I was making for her, making sure they were smooth so she wouldn't get a splinter. It was in the comfortable quiet that grew between us, a silence that was no longer empty, but full of something unspoken and precious. Then, the letter came from Boston. I saw it on her kitchen table, thick official stationery. Her old firm, offering her old life back. A corporate apology, they called it. A chance to return to the city, to the career, to the speed and the noise. Everything she'd run from. She didn't tell me for 3 days, but I saw the shadow in her storm-gray eyes. I saw her looking at my house from her porch, a painful calculation in her gaze. The night she finally told me, she asked me to come over. Her voice on the phone was taut, a violin string tuned too tight. She was standing by the fireplace, the letter in her hand. "They want me back, Ethan." The words hung in the air, sharp and final. I felt the old numbness try to rush back in, a cold, familiar tide. This was the moment I had always expected. The leaving. "It's safety," she said, more to herself than to me. "It's a known path. It's what broke you," I finished quietly. The words weren't an accusation. They were just the truth. Her eyes filled. "And what if I stay here?" she asked, her voice trembling. "What if I choose this fragile, quiet thing between us? What if I heal all the way out here and then—" She couldn't say it. The fear was too vast. I took a step toward her. My heart was pounding, a loud, vulnerable drum in the quiet room. I thought of all the things I hadn't said, all the feelings I'd let the silence speak for. But silence wasn't enough now, not for this. "Clara," I said, and my voice cracked on her name. "If you stay, I can't promise I won't be broken. I can't promise it will be easy, but I can promise you this. In this quiet house with me, you will never, ever have to question if you are seen." A single tear traced a path down her cheek. She looked from the letter in her hand to my face, searching. The clock on the mantel ticked, measuring the distance between a safe, lonely past and a terrifying, beautiful possibility. She didn't move. The letter, that crisp white promise of a familiar misery, trembled in her hand. The clock ticked, a sound that suddenly felt violent in the stillness. I saw the war in her eyes, the terrified pull of the known, and the terrifying leap toward the fragile, beautiful unknown we'd built. "Seen," she repeated, my word hanging in the air between us. She let out a breath, a shaky, broken thing. "Do you know how long it's been since I felt seen, Ethan? Not needed, not used, seen." She placed the letter on the mantel carefully, as if it might explode. The simple action made my throat tighten. She turned back to me, wiping her cheek with the back of her hand, a gesture so vulnerably human it shattered me. "In Boston," she whispered. The silence was so loud, it was the silence of 100 people who didn't care if I existed. This silence. She looked around the old living room, at the firelight dancing on the walls I'd repaired, at the 2 empty coffee mugs on the table. "This silence feels different. It feels like a held breath." I crossed the room. I didn't think. I just closed the distance, stopping an arm's length away. Close enough to feel the warmth from her, far enough to give her every chance to step back. "I'm not asking you to stay for me, Clara," I said, the words raw. "I'm asking you to stay for you, the version of you that laughs at the squirrels stealing birdseed, the one who writes notes on paper, the one who is healing right here in this quiet." Her eyes searched mine, looking for the lie, the hidden trap. All she found was my own broken truth reflected back at her. "And what about you?" she asked. "If I stay, will you let yourself be seen too? Really seen? Not just the carpenter who fixes things, the man who was hurt, the man who is still scared." It was the hardest question I'd ever been asked. My instinct was to retreat, to build the wall back brick by brick. But I looked at her, standing there brave and trembling, offering me her shattered pieces, and my fortress finally crumbled. "I'm terrified," I admitted, the confession tearing loose from a deep, dark place inside. The thought of feeling all of that again, the hope, the possibility of losing it, it's paralyzing. I swallowed hard. "But the thought of you getting in that car and driving back to what broke you, that's worse. That's a different kind of silence, one I don't think I could survive." A soft, shuddering sob escaped her. Not from sadness, from release, from a dam breaking. She stepped into me, her forehead coming to rest against my chest. I froze for a second, then my arms came around her slowly, carefully, as if she were the most delicate thing I'd ever held. I rested my chin on the top of her head. We stood like that in the firelight, holding each other up, 2 broken structures finding a new kind of architecture in the leaning. She didn't go back to Boston. Spring came to Maple Street. It didn't arrive with a fanfare, but with a slow, green patience. The snow receded, revealing the ground we'd been standing on all along. I helped her plant a garden in her grandmother's old plots. She'd point to a spot, and I'd turn the earth. My hands, skilled with wood, learned the softer language of soil and roots. We didn't talk much those afternoons. The sun on our backs and the rhythm of the work was conversation enough. One evening, as the fireflies began to blink in the gathering dusk, we were on her porch. Our porch, it had started to feel like. She was sketching in a notebook, and I was whittling a piece of scrap cedar. "I got a job," she said, not looking up from her drawing. "At the library in town, part-time." I put my knife down. "Yeah?" "Yeah." She finally glanced at me, a shy, hopeful look in her eyes. "It's quiet there, and they need someone to help organize the local history section. It feels right." My chest swelled with a pride so fierce it startled me. "Clara, that's perfect." It was hers, not a path someone else laid out, one she'd found for herself here. She smiled, that real, full smile that still made my breath catch. I thought so too. The climax of our story wasn't a dramatic fight or a grand gesture. It happened on a perfectly ordinary Wednesday. I was in my workshop, finishing a rocking chair for her porch. She walked in, carrying 2 glasses of iced tea. She set mine down, ran her hand over the smooth, curved arm of the chair. "It's beautiful, Ethan." "It's for you," I said, stating the obvious. She looked at me then, her gaze steady and clear. "I love you," she said. 3 words. So simple. They hung in the sawdust-filled air, not a demand, not a question. Just a statement, offered as freely as the iced tea. And for the first time in my life, the words didn't scare me. They didn't feel like a cage or a contract. They felt like a key, turning in a lock I'd sealed shut years ago. I set my sanding block down. I took her hands, sawdust and all. My voice was thick but clear. "I love you, Clara Bennett." It wasn't a whisper, it was a vow, spoken aloud in the bright afternoon light. And we both knew it was true, not because it was shouted, but because it had been proven, day after quiet day, in repaired steps and handwritten notes and shared silences that were no longer empty. Our love story never made a sound the world would notice. It's in the rhythm of our coexisting lives in 2 quiet houses that became one home. It's in the garden that blooms wildly every summer. It's in the stack of her notes I've saved in a wooden box I made, each one a testament to a feeling slowly, bravely unfurling. Sometimes, on the porch at night, she'll still grow quiet. I'll see the old shadow cross her face, the memory of a hurt that ran deep. And now, I don't just watch from my window. I reach over, I take her hand. I thread my fingers through hers, a silent anchor in the dark. She'll squeeze back, a little pulse that says, "I'm here. I'm staying." And I am too. We built a new house, not on broken ground, but on ground we mended together. We learned that a heart doesn't have to be fixed to be full. It just has to be held, carefully, by someone who understands its fractures. Our love doesn't shout. It's the quietest, truest sound I've ever known. And it stays.